Guys, what's up? I'm gonna try and keep this one a bit quick. But this week's Flick of the Week, I'm sorry I skipped out on last week's, but I can go ahead and tell you what last week's was gonna be. Last week's was gonna be Video Violence 2, which was a pretty solid little shot on video horror flick. Definitely as awesome as the first one, although I still prefer the first one. Now, this week's Flick of the Week is a film that has yet to get a 100% legit official DVD release from like a major distribution company. It's from 2009. It's a live action and / animated psychological psychedelic like horror film, science fiction horror film, from director Jimmy Screamer Claus, who is the absolute fucking madman behind Where the Dead Go to Die, that absolutely horrific animated film that I reviewed about a year ago. Now, when I say horrific, I do not mean it is bad. I mean it is genuinely horrifying, because the film is very, very unnerving, and I really couldn't help but like it because it was at least original and it was legitimately creepy and disturbing at times. But this is his very first movie. It's his first feature film, at least, and it hasn't gotten an official DVD release. This is the only release available, and it is a 2-disc limited edition DVD-R version, and it's limited to 100 copies, and it is Reality Bleed Through, which is autographed by Jimmy Screamer Claus, which is really cool, and I have copy 96 of 100, so there are only about 4 copies of this film left, and then it is gone forever. But basically, this movie is about it's like set in a future date, and the government is overthrown by a sun-worshipping cult, drug cult called Sister Salvation. And the environment is damaged, and anybody who goes outside during the day is basically burned alive because the sun is like close to the earth or something like that. And there's also a deadly plague that's killing millions of people at the same time, and that's basically what this film is about. It's kind of hard to explain what this movie's about. I'm going to try and do my best to explain. Basically, the film starts out with this guy who is thinking about killing himself, and then he talks about how there's this guy there's this like mysterious figure, this kind of like spirit that appears called the Suicide King, who appears whenever somebody wants to commit suicide and basically is like, go ahead, do it. And he doesn't kill himself, and then we run into basically a group of people who are all staying in a house, because they're all staying in a house because it's the middle of the day. Because it's the middle of the day, and the sun's out and everybody's gonna get fried. And we have, basically in this house, we have some people that are faithless, we have someone who's infected by the plague, a bunch of like a few other people, someone who is a member of the sun-worshipping cult Sister Salvation, and then there's the guy who was going to kill himself, who eventually shows up later in the film. And it's really hard to explain like how this film plays out, because it's a little confusing, although it's a pretty straightforward movie. It's basically like each scene sets up to learn more about what's going on in this futuristic setting, in this kind of dystopian future, and it also sets up for this weird like psychological breakdown of a character, as well as like a really trippy kind of animated segment. And there's this point in the film where the guy who was being followed by the Suicide King is talking to someone. He's talking to this strange figure that is like in one of his hallucinations or something, and he tells the hallucination, "How do I know that you are not a figment of my imagination?" And the figure tells him, "Well, how do you know that you're not a figment of my imagination?" it's a very, very trippy, weird movie, and I honestly have no idea why I mentioned that scene in particular. That one just really stuck with me. But I'll say this, it's not as good as Where the Dead Go to Die, honestly. I didn't enjoy it as much as Where the Dead Go to Die. It doesn't have the same creepy vibe. It definitely has a few of these kind of psychological elements, but the animation here is really not as good as it is in Where the Dead Go to Die. And that's saying something, because the animation in Where the Dead Go to Die was pretty bad. But what I can say that's positive about this movie, it is very, very interesting. And I might watch it again sometime, to make sure I truly, like, full-on comprehend what's going on, because I'm still a little confused about it. Maybe I'm just an idiot. But there's also like some really cool gore effects in the movies too, and I would honestly say, like, this movie is like a kind of combination of I want to say maybe David Lynch-esque surrealism, and like some really surreal movies. Like if you can give me an example of like a pretty dark surreal movie. I can't really think of anything off the top of my head. The main one that comes to mind is Eraserhead. So I'm gonna say it's kind of like a combination of Eraserhead and like Black Past, Olaf Ittenbach's Black Past, and Where the Dead Go to Die. It's very, very weird, trippy, psychological. There's some really cheap gore effects in the film that are honestly like make the film feel like a kind of like a modern tribute to shot-on-video horror, which I don't think that's what they were going for when they made this movie and did those effects, but that's what it kind of feels like. I feel like this is a modern shot-on-video, like a return to shot-on-video with a bit of surrealism and weirdness thrown in, and it is a very, very original film, and I would highly recommend you check it out. Again, there are only about 4 copies of this film left on his online store, and then it is gone and it's no longer available. So if you're interested, go pick up a copy. It's only like $15, and it comes with, and it's a collector's item too, because there's only 100 copies, and I'm sure this is going to be worth something someday. And it comes with a bunch of short films and special features and commentary and audio commentary from the director. And I watched Where the Dead Go to Die with the audio commentary on, and it was actually really, really interesting. And it's one of those movies that, you know, it's interesting to watch on its own, but when you watch with the audio commentary on, you know, and you hear the director talking about like everything he did for the film, the movie becomes even more interesting, because that's where you just find more out. I don't know how to explain it. Like, Where the Dead Go to Die is one of the films that I would say is like one of the top films, one of the best films to watch with the audio commentary on if you like the movie, because it really makes it more interesting, and I'm definitely watching the audio commentary for this film, and I would definitely give the film a solid recommendation and tell you guys to go check it out. So I guess that's it for this week's Flick of the Week, and I will see you guys maybe this weekend, maybe next week, I don't know. Yeah, peace.